Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to A Mother's Secret.
A small child laying on the road, covered up with a white sheet that appears to be dead. We begin with a decades-old cold case. Decades-old case.
The decades-old case, many know it as the Gianca child case. A baby boy less than 6 months old found dead and dismembered on a country road in Thompson Township.
Interviewing witnesses, looking for suspects, all the traditional methods had failed. Police say DNA technology is what helped them.
We were able to get it down to a grandchild of one of 10 siblings.
Essentially, we're going to pose as the baby and look for our relatives. Oh, are you Harvey?
The hair in the back of my neck stood up. We found what we were looking for.
Today we announced that the case has been solved.
A large focus on whether or not this baby was born alive or if this baby was a stillbirth.
The mothers couldn't comprehend a mother doing this to their child.
There is an indication that it breathed on its own.
Was this a live birth? In my opinion, you cannot make that determination.
Under those circumstances, your verdict can only be not guilty.
This is what he's going to tell you.
Situation.
Can I grab the gun?
I'm not the first place to put a body. No, sir.
The only thing they could do was kill him.
If you want to say anything, leave the jury to find the defendant.
Two women were out in Thompson Township and they were delivering newspapers. They drove by what they first thought was a baby doll in the road.
After they turned around and came back down the road, they thought it just looked different, and it wasn't a doll. It was a baby.
Well, when I got there, it was obvious that this is a newborn baby that's laying in the middle of the road. It looked like there was a tire track over it, like somebody had driven down the road and actually ran it over.
The case was assigned to Geauga County Sheriff's Office homicide detective Tom Duke.
It's such a horrific crime that somebody, a mother of a human being, could take and discard somebody like that.
While investigators wait for autopsy results, they search the grounds around the area where the baby was found, looking for clues.
Any clothing, body parts, any kind of evidence that may have been left inadvertently at the scene by whoever left the baby here.
What we found out through the course of the investigation, it was actually left in a wooded area in a trash bag, and animals had discovered the baby and brought it out into the roadway.
We have determined that the infant was a male. We have determined that the infant was Caucasian.
The community looked at this and said, this poor child was abandoned by his own parents, possibly killed by his own parents. Someone needs to step in and speak on behalf of the child.
The first thing I thought, the baby was going to need a funeral.
Today's date is November 13th, 1993. This is Deputy McGrath. We are conducting surveillance of all vehicles and or people coming into the services for baby John Doe.
The investigators videotaped that funeral. They recorded license plates that came.
Adam Ball King, 05.
In hopes that maybe a family member or one of the parents would come to the funeral and maybe they could develop a lead that way.
One wondered if perhaps the unknown parents of the baby boy were at the service.
The Bible states in the book of Genesis,
About 150 people attended the non-denominational funeral service at the Church of St. Mary for the baby they called Geauga's child. 6 area ministers took part.
This baby boy suffered at the hands of people who didn't care.
The same sheriff's men followed hundreds of leads to hospitals, schools,
and individuals all over Northeast Ohio will be pallbearers.
After never being allowed to be adopted in life, he has been adopted in death. Given love after never being given a chance at life.
They made sure that it had a headstone. They named it Jaga's Child because it didn't have a name, and that name sticks to this day.
The baby will be laid to rest. The case won't be.
The case is still active. It'll remain active until it is solved.
They checked, anybody that could have been pregnant, anybody that could have been pregnant that didn't tell their parents.
District Attorney Jim Flays was a teenager at the time of the incident.
The police came to my high school and were inquiring as to if any students were late-term pregnant. You have a situation like this, you find a baby in the roadway, there's no witnesses, there's no link, there's nothing. We have nothing there.
Almost annually, they would set up a camera at the gravesite where the headstone was to see if maybe a parent or a mom or a family member would come out to visit the gravesite.
All the traditional methods had failed, interviewing witnesses, looking for potential suspects, and there's cold cases and then there's ice cold cases, and this was an ice cold case.
For years, homicide detective Dewey did all he could to keep the case in the public eye.
His only chance for peace to find the baby's mother and bring her to justice.
Somewhere out there, the mother, some close friend, relative, knows who the parents of this child are. Maybe it's time to get this off their chest.
Throughout the years, they never gave up. I know they got hundreds of tips that they followed up on each and every one of those.
We would get a tip. We think, this is it. We're going to go out of state. We're going to get some DNA because we can use DNA then.
There was a tip from Arizona from a man who once lived near where the baby was found.
He had a girlfriend that was pregnant 5 months prior. There's no child afterwards, after this pregnancy. We thought we had it figured out, and then when we got the result, it was very disheartening.
And, it was another dead end. So, although it was discouraging, it wasn't discouraging enough that we were going to give up.
They looked, actually, that maybe the mother had been killed. Maybe the mother's body was in the woods or something, but nothing followed to indicate that was what happened.
Good morning, Nancy. It is great to see you again.
Even suggestions from a psychic investigator, Nancy Meyer, were checked out.
So roll some videotape for you now. I'm sure most of you remember this tragic situation. Probably saw it on the news. One of those unsolved situations. Are you getting anything? Are you feeling anything here?
A very unique personality. She's no longer with the man that forced her into this. I think her big problem in coming forward is she feels that she would be arrested.
And the psychic was at least right about that.
My position was, once the baby's born and the baby takes a breath and is alive, ending that life is murder.
They gave birth to this baby. The coroner's office said that the baby took at least one breath. So as far as we were concerned, as far as I was concerned, it was premeditated.
In the year 2005, the lead detective, Tom Dewey, retired from the sheriff's office, although he was still a regular at the gravesite.
He was brought to tears often. He just took it personally.
So the case remained open for 26 years, and it wasn't until Detective Don Seaman took over and had heard about the use of genetic testing to help solve murders in the Golden State Killer case out in California.
Using the most innovative DNA technology available at this time.
Essentially tracking down the suspect by using DNA submitted by relatives to public sites.
And then he thought, well, maybe that could be used in this case.
So I approached our sheriff and the prosecutor with the thought of hopefully trying this new investigative technique.
And his big ask was, he says, listen, I think this is going to cost $5,000, and I'd like you and the sheriff to split it.
We've got another idea. It's worth a try.
What the heck? Let's do it. Let's spend the money. Let's get the DNA profile. Let's see see if we get anything out of this.
Because it's important. It's important to the people of our county to have some closure. And that's where the break really was.
There's toys, there's coins, there's flowers, there's always somebody going up and doing something. He's become more like a close relative to the community.
And after more than 2 decades, detectives, using the child's DNA, finally began to close in on who his parents were.
Essentially, we're going to pose as the baby and look for our relatives using different methods.
There were more than 1,400 possible connections to the mother and the father, all around the world, starting with the father's family tree.
We were talking to people in England, in France, in Lebanon, and several other countries, because those were the matches in his family tree. And we found that a lot of them had been born in Lebanon, but they were adopted out into these other countries.
And then the mother's family tree took shape.
We were able to get it down to that Juggus child was a grandchild of one of 10 siblings. One of them is living. His name is Harvey.
Harvey Eastwood. He lived about 30 miles away in Lyndhurst, Ohio.
He had 2 daughters. Neither one was from the area. And we thought to ourselves, there's no way it's him or his daughters. We said, let's go talk to Harvey. We'll rule him out.
Yes, sir. Hello, are you Harvey? Yes, I am. Harvey, my name is Don Seaman. I'm a detective with Geauga County Sheriff's Office. I just want to see if you'd be willing to talk to us.
We talked to him for approximately an hour, and we actually were getting ready to leave. Thanked him. We were not going to get his DNA because he said that he didn't even know where Geauga County was. And as we're getting ready to leave, he said something along the lines of that his children and grandchildren had met their spouses at a camp.
Where was that at? At Camp Cornelia. What's it called? Cornelia.
So my partner and I are Googling it on our phones because we weren't familiar with it. So it was only a couple miles from where the baby was found. So I again asked him if any of his children or grandchildren had dated anybody of foreign descent.
Your son-in-laws, do they have any foreign descent? Oh, Mark has Lebanese descendants.
And at that point, my partner and I looked at each other and didn't know what to think.
Mark was the husband of Harvey's daughter, Gail.
So I asked his wife, Nancy, for her DNA, and the results came back. They were the grandparents of Juggus' child.
Everything pointed to Gail.
So we had kind of set up outside her house early in the morning. We saw her husband leave and go to work, Mark. We had set up a hidden camera in a coffee cup so we could record as we approached her. And when she came out of the house.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Good. Listen, you're on your insurance office. We just want to see if we can talk to you for several minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You have any idea what we want to talk to you about? Because I kind of think you might.
Well, my parents said that you were at their house.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think that's about?
It was about a baby.
Yeah. What about?
A baby that was left.
Just the hair on the back of my neck stood up and knew that we had finally found what we were looking for. We're not here to judge you, Gail. We don't know what was going on at the time. We don't want to speculate either, okay? So I don't think you want us to speculate. We're not here to arrest you, okay? We are here to take your DNA, okay? And we would like for you to tell us your side of the story, because we'd like to know. As of right now, you're not under arrest. You're not going to be arrested today. But we want to know what was going on. I think after 26 years, it's time. Don't you? said to be weighing items.
Should we go inside?
Well, what we'd like to do is get your DNA, okay? And then we would like for you to come back to our sheriff's office so that we can talk. You're not being arrested, okay? But we need to sit down and we need to hear your side of the story.
So it appears that she knew this was coming. It was only a matter of time now before they got to her.
What this does is just parts some stem cells from the inside and out.
She's not crying. She doesn't seem scared. She's just like, yes, I dumped a child back in 1993. And from there, she agrees to come to the sheriff's office for an interview.
Yeah. Listen, I'm just going to put your person back.
Just for safety.
A normal person would fear that every day, knowing what you've done, that somebody's going to knock on the door one day and all of a sudden your freedom's going to be gone because of something you did horrible years ago.
It's a very conservative county by Northeast Ohio standards.
Half the people know the other half of the people.
The type of community where people don't lock their doors, they don't expect anything bad to happen. They just don't.
And for more than 20 years, Gail Eastwood Ritchie seemed to fit right in.
Lived a pretty quiet life in a very residential street. She's got 3 adult children. Her husband is like a scout leader. She was the office manager for this dance school. That was her job. Really, she had 0 criminal record. Led a very good life, during the interceding time.
Okay, so I'm going to just review your rights real quick. Maybe right there, right time.
Now, she was under investigation for murder.
The detectives asked me to come down to observe the interview. Up front, she admitted she gave birth to a child in the spring of 1993.
And I honestly do not remember the date or the day when baby was born. I do know it was winter. I was at work. I was a nanny for a family in Shaker Heights. I hadn't been feeling well at all that day. The next thing I knew, I was giving birth. Baby in the toilet. I didn't know what to do. The only thing you could think of was baby. I had no idea what the sex was. I never looked at it.
And according to her, she left the child in her trunk for either a couple days or a couple weeks. Not telling anyone.
So you don't remember if the baby was in your trunk for like a week or just a couple days?
It could have been.
It could have been as long as a week?
Possibly, yes.
And then, she said, she drove somewhere near the camp she had attended years earlier.
I remember stopping on the road, and I walked in as far as I could, and I left the back.
She was very cold, very just matter of fact.
And obviously, that the baby was born alive.
I don't remember. I don't recall it ever crying.
Okay. But it's not like it was stillborn or anything. The coroner's report shows that it had actually was breathing.
Okay.
So at some point, there had to be something that you heard or saw, and the baby had been moving.
It's possible. I don't remember. I remember picking it up, taking it in the bag.
We had a feeling that there was something more that she was holding back. So when we had taken a break, it was something that we discussed, approaching her on and seeing if she would, admit to any other children.
And I thought, you really think she's going to tell you that she killed another child?
But you know and I know this isn't the only time. That there's more times that this has happened. And now is the time that you need to tell us about those again. How many other times has this happened? One other time. And when was that? Was it before or after this child?
Before.
I couldn't believe it when she said it though. When the words came out of her mouth. She actually drew us a map and put an X on the map where she dumped that child. Unfortunately, we were not able to find any remnants of the body there.
The next step now was to talk to Gail's husband, Mark Ritchie.
Our detectives that she's talked to today are the only two she's ever talked to about birthing a child in Shaker Heights, putting it into a garbage bag, and driving it to Geauga County.
So my wife said this?
So somebody...
That's news to me. Well, wow. I don't know what to say.
I will say, in watching his interview, I think it's a little odd. He doesn't seem to express a lot of emotion.
But you're telling me, as a lie for our married life, entire married life.
There was some concern that maybe if he was made aware of this, he would have gotten angry and posed a threat to her.
Again, I'm not going to sit here and deny the thought that everything that I know is completely upside down, and how do I feel about that? It's shocking. Part of me says it's revolting. Part of me says it's like, oh my God, what did I do? What is my responsibility in this matter? Did I give her any indication that would suggest she has to take this course of action?
Do you have any intentions of planning to hurt your wife?
No.
Or are you to a point where you can't see her or talk to her?
And we begin with a decades-old cold case out of Geauga County.
For the past 26 years, the Geauga County Sheriff's Office has been working very hard to solve the case of Geauga's baby. Today we announce that the case has been solved. Gail Eastwood Ritchie, age 49, of Euclid, Ohio, was indicted for aggravated murder and murder.
The sheriff's first call after the arrest was to the retired detective, Tom Dewey.
He was so happy and wanted to see somebody take responsibility for it.
Years and 6 days after he was found, the process of justice begins for a baby boy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, Mr. Ritchie has been charged with aggravated murder and murder.
Both counts carried a life sentence with no possibility of parole until at least 15 or 20 years.
This trial in this case kind of turned into an all or nothing proposition. The statute of limitations had run on every potential crime except aggravated murder and murder.
And offered manslaughter.
So she would have been eligible for probation all the way up to 11 years in prison.
We were informed by the defense that the defendant refused the plea agreement, which is her right. It just kind of shocked us, given that there was a huge risk. So the trial started. You will see a picture of the child as she was found in the road that morning. They're graphic and they're disturbing. But they are necessary for the state to prove its case. The ultimate conclusion of cause of death is undetermined violent cause. It was not a situation where the child was born with some birth defects that would have rendered him either stillborn or caused him to die soon after birth. He was an otherwise healthy baby boy, and either some action or failure to act in just doing general care for the child is what caused the death of that child.
Prosecutors had studied the outcome of a similar case in southern Ohio, where a jury acquitted a high school cheerleader who gave birth and buried her baby in the backyard of her home, testifying the child was not born alive.
And we have gone down there and met with that prosecutor and his team. He had some wise words for us, and he felt, especially the women on his jury that were mothers, they had to believe that the child wasn't born alive because they couldn't comprehend a mother doing this to their child.
And the judge had already ruled the prosecution could not use Gail's admission in the interrogation that she had done the same thing before.
How many other times has this happened?
It was not going to be a slam dunk.
Good morning, everybody. Let me tell you what really happened 29 years ago today to Bertha Simmons School. Baby didn't make a sound. Baby didn't move. Still attached to the umbilical cord, the placenta all came out of her all in one big push. She was scared. She had no idea what to do. You'll hear from Gail herself that her dad never made her feel loved. It was a very cold household. They would have family dinners, and there'd be very little discussion except for her father ranting that no daughter of mine will ever have a child out of wedlock. That is the Gail Ritchie that you're going to be judging. Choices and decisions she made. You'll hear her testify, as I said. You'll hear her express regret and remorse for how she disposed of this baby's body. She didn't do anything to purposely cause the death. This was a stillborn baby. And under those circumstances, your verdict can only be not guilty.
So, the case would come down to whether the child was born alive.
Fortunately, they had saved a number of slides, microscopic slides from the lungs.
3 of the slides were crucial, based on the original medical examiner's findings at the time.
He found the lung cells to be partially expanded, indicating the child had breathed on its own. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Joseph Philo.
The original medical examiner was no longer alive, so Dr. Joseph Philo from nearby Cuyahoga County was the state's key witness.
Could you walk us through what were your findings of these 3 slides?
The majority of the lung tissues have open air spaces caused by the child breathing, and they're not overdistended, they're not collapsed. These are evidence that this child breathed. I don't know how many breaths were taken, but there is an indication that it breathed on its own. And so that's why it's a live birth that was had given the opportunity, may have lived a full life.
I have no further questions.
Good afternoon, doctor. Good afternoon. How are you?
Defense lawyer Stephen Bradley focused on the shortcomings in the original medical examiner's report.
There's no description, first of all, of where he took these tissue samples from in the lung.
Right.
And there's only one lung here, right?
Yes.
So if in a typical or routine situation, you would want tissue slides from both lungs, ideally, yes. And so that's another example of what would be a either vague and or incomplete report. True. So in fact, the reason why you want to look at 4 samples, in this case you said the entirety, is because in fact it could show different evidence than what you're seeing in those 3 tissue slides. Fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Yeah. Today was the Giaga's child murder trial, and the state rests its case. She is still expected to take the stand in this case, and the defense will start presenting its case tomorrow morning.
Day 3 in the trial of the decades-old case known as Giaga's child.
That's right, Will. The big question going into today was whether or not we'll see her testify.
Their plan and their strategy was to, paint her as this poor woman who didn't know what was happening, didn't know what to do.
So prosecutors told the judge that if she testifies, they should be able to use her admission that there had been a second baby she abandoned.
The judge thought about it, and he said, if you start going down that road, then I am going to reconsider my ruling and let that evidence back in. We're going to play the second part of her confession. So that dealt a kind of a crippling blow to the defense strategy because they decided not to call her as a witness.
And they chose instead to only offer one witness.
My name is Dr. Kent Harshbarger,
who was their forensic expert, to rebut the testimony from Dr. Field.
I'm a board-certified forensic pathologist, and I currently am the elected official of Montgomery County Coroner, which is Dayton, Ohio.
For him to testify in this case, I was a little surprised. He is normally a prosecution witness, so it turned into the battle of the experts.
Is there any way, with the information that you've been provided in this case, that you could comfortably, professionally, ethically tell us to a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether this was a live birth or not? I could not do that. I did not. I don't do that. It's not my opinion.
Basically, their expert said, based on the evidence, he can't make a determination one way or the other. So their argument was, the state just does not have enough evidence to prove that the child was born beyond a reasonable doubt.
So the prosecution, in its cross-examination of Dr. Harshbarger, the only defense witness, needed to undercut his testimony.
So, Dr. Harshbarger, I think this is kind of glossed over a little bit during your direct examination, but I want to ask you, you were actually paid by the defense team to review this case and come in and testify as doctor.
That's true.
How much were you paid to testify?
I don't know I've been paid anything, and certainly for my time. I charge $350 an hour.
And is that $350 an hour to review and testify?
No, it's $350 an hour to review.
And then how much was it for testifying?
$2,500 for that 4-hour block.
You looked at the photos of the scene and of the body?
Correct.
Gail had shown little emotion until now.
When we showed the autopsy photographs, which are extremely graphic, I do remember looking over to her. She was looking at the screen, and she was crying at that point. But that was the only emotion I saw from her.
I want to talk to you a little bit about suffocation. If a baby was placed in a bag, they would then be suffocated.
Correct.
And difficult to breathe given the limited oxygen in the bag and eventually run out of air.
Yes.
And there would be no physical injuries visible on the child consistent with that.
If that's the hypothetical, yes, there's no injury. Okay, thank you. Redirect.
Doctor,
yes, sir.
Was this child suffocated?
I have no way of knowing that. You have to get to a live birth. I don't think you can get to a live birth. If you can't get to a live birth, you can't suffocate a body.
Was this a live birth?
In my opinion, you cannot make that determination to a reasonable degree of medical certainty.
Now, prosecutor asked you about you getting paid.
Yes.
Is there anything wrong, unethical, inappropriate, illegal, immoral with you charging a fee for your services?
No.
Have you ever had your house painted?
Yes.
Do the painters get paid?
Yes.
What about a plumber? Does the plumber get paid?
Yes.
is there any significance whatsoever you're being paid in this case and having it jade your opinions? No, my opinions are my opinions. Doctor, I think this is the end of my questioning of you, and safe travels back to Baby.
As the defense rested, the prosecution team was worried.
I told my assistant prosecutor, Nick, I said, I think you're going to lose.
I gave it a 50-50 chance. Whether we get a conviction or not, we solved the case.
We do want to get started now with the latest on the Giaga child's trial.
A large focus of those closing arguments today was on the fact of whether or not this baby was born alive or if this baby was a stillbirth.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, if he was stillborn, no matter what action the defendant took, she wouldn't have caused his death. So, did the state present sufficient evidence for you to find beyond a reasonable doubt that the child was born alive? Yes. And we have her own statement to the police where she admitted that after giving birth, she took this child, placed him in a garbage bag, tied him up, which would have cut off his oxygen, and placed him in her trunk. Her actions caused the death of this child. But then finally, you have to look at, for aggravated murder, did the state prove prior calculation and design? What does she do to prepare for birth? Nothing. Doesn't go to the doctor, doesn't tell anyone, doesn't have anything in place for when she gives birth to this child. This is a situation where a newborn baby boy was born to this woman, and she literally treated him like a piece of garbage. Didn't even marry him. We ask that you return verdicts of guilty of both charges. Thank you.
Bradley, you may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, everybody. This is a tragic situation. All and the manner in which this baby's body was disposed of is terrible. We're not here to debate that or decide that. It's difficult to look at some of those images. It can't help but evoke emotion. We wouldn't be human if we didn't have an emotional response to those images. But we're not here to decide this case. You have a duty. Those images. But we're not here to decide this case. You have a duty, a responsibility to consider the facts and the evidence here. There's no evidence, no reliable evidence. But this was what I heard. All of that evidence clearly demonstrates the state does not know what happened here and cannot prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt Gail Ritchie committed either the crimes of aggravated or murder. You can only return verdicts of not guilty. The vote counts for this indictment. That is exactly what we're asking you to do in this case.
Gail Ritchie's husband and 3 adult children were in the courtroom, and so was the widow of the original lead detective, Tom Dewey, who died just before the start of the trial.
I reviewed the verdict forms. They have been signed by all 12 jurors, and they are in order.
There were 2 counts, murder and the more serious aggravated murder.
I will now read the jury's verdict. On count 1, charging aggravated murder, the jury finds the defendant not guilty. On
count 2, charging murder. Finds the defendant guilty.
She had zero reaction. She just sat there, and I remember her family and her kids were in the back. I remember audibly hearing them, very loudly sobbing. But she had no reaction.
Good afternoon, everyone. State of Ohio versus Gail Ritchie.
Because of COVID-19, Ritchie appeared by a video link from the Geauga County Jail. Only one person spoke on her behalf.
Your Honor, my name is Gene McAfee. I'm the pastor of Faith United Church of Christ in Richmond Heights. I always found Gail to be a kind, loving, patient, and understanding mother, wife, daughter, daughter-in-law, and friend. Gail has also been a victim of her wrongdoing for nearly 3 decades, and she will bear the burden of what she did for the rest of her life. I therefore respectfully ask you to exercise whatever judicial leniency the law allows as you pass judgment on Mrs. Gail Ritchie. Thank you, Your Honor, for considering this request.
Ritchie, who had turned down a plea deal that would have been only a few years in prison, now was given the opportunity to speak on her own behalf.
We have instructed Gail not to make any statement to the court in allocution insofar as she certainly intends to exercise her appellate rights.
I think she would have been in a really good position to try to mitigate that sentence. You talk about, life-altering decisions. I mean, she's made several, and several bad ones, and this last decision was very bad.
The choice you made in 1993 was a terrible one. It's almost indescribable in its sheer awfulness. But I also acknowledge, as horrendous as your behavior was 29 years ago and more, I acknowledge you've since led a respectable, gracious life. Ultimately, you gained that time on the back of a helpless infant whose body you concealed in the woods. It is finally time to atone for these awful, unnecessary deeds committed 3 decades ago. So I sentence you to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 15 years.
Geauga's child lies here now in safety, loved by many. Just too late. Too late to save his life. Too late to make things right. But not too late to teach us all to love and cherish life.